Welcoming David on stage.
Well, thank you very much, Liddy, and I'm the chairman of OMFIF, so if anything goes wrong, I get the blame, and if it goes right, as I'm sure it will, Liddy gets the credit. That's the demarcation that we have among ourselves. But I'd like to say a warm welcome to you all. You are all bridge builders, and as you know, that is the title of today's get-together. And I'm a bit more optimistic than I was a year ago when we had the first of these forums about the general outlook. Last year I characterised this as a pattern of light and shade between Britain and China. There was a lot of shade around, and I felt that geopolitics held very much the key, and it was going to be a bit of a bumpy ride. I warned that the path to success was getting somewhat narrower. Now, there are still a lot of shadows. The war in Ukraine is continuing, and there's also a sense of stalemate about that, and a sense of alarm that this is becoming commonplace. And then we've had the horrifying events in the Middle East in the last 2 months, a hint of optimism overnight, which we're very pleased about, I think, about a hint of a breakthrough over the hostages. But there's still a long, long, long way to go in the Middle East. There are, though, I would say, room for some form of cautious optimism about China and the UK and China and the West in general. China has emerged from the lockdown with some very bold measures at the beginning of the year, and it is now going back to growth, although not at the heady pace that we had reckoned with over the last 2 decades. We'd all been forewarned, though, that that was going to slow down anyway, so that's not really a big surprise. If you think about the overall relationship between the two, the superpower relationship, it's very important, I think, that between the US and China, we've seen some thaw. Welcome, Aileen Yang from the China Construction Bank. The balloon incident, I'm pleased to say, has been deflated. That's a very good piece of news. We've seen a lot of high-level diplomacy between the US and China, and most notably the rather good conversation that the two presidents held in San Francisco just last week. Now, the UK, after the autumn 2022 upheavals, has returned to a semblance of normality with a government that is now determined to put relationship with the European Union onto a somewhat better footing, somewhat more common sense than we've had in the last 5 or 6 years. We've got Treasury orthodoxy, much maligned over the last year. If we saw what happened in autumn 2022, Treasury orthodoxy is back in vogue. We'll see that today with the autumn statement. There'll be a lot of attention on sound finance, although 1 or 2 tax cuts as well. Elections loom in lots of places, in the UK, in the United States, in Europe, possibly in other jurisdictions as well. And this means that a lot of what we say today will be very much configured by politics. The government in this country, sensible though it is, may turn out to be a short-term phenomenon. So may be the new foreign secretary that everybody knows about. He's had a lot of very good links with China over the years. We remember the golden era. He's now back in business, newly inaugurated in the House of Lords. Now, the grass in this country is certainly not always greener on this side of the European Union. Britain left the European Union, after all, 3 or 4 years ago. But the European pastures are also far from being verdant. In Germany, the heartland of Europe, a country which a lot of you in the audience know well, and with which Britain still has very, very good relations. It's still one of our top trading partners. We witness fault lines in politics, we see faltering growth, and we see failed debt breaks. So the misère in the UK, which we've seen over the economy, is certainly not limited to Britain alone. Now, politics can get in the way of business. We know that. That's nothing to complain about. That's always been the case. So there shouldn't be a lot of griping about that. But I definitely think, and this is very much a theme of this conference, that there's a lot that Britain and China can do together in business and in finance that can be outside the realms of the meteorological swings in the weather of politics, in education, in financial services, medical technology, countering climate change, and also, of course, in the field of artificial intelligence. I was very, very pleased that China played a big supporting role in the UK-inspired summit meeting in Bletchley Park at the beginning of November. That was a big, big breakthrough, I think, that China took part in that, and is really putting its shoulders to the wheel. Now, in the UK and China, we have a lot of very experienced, very talented, very dynamic people. They are bankers, they are trade people, they are business people. A lot of people are connected with students, lawyers, many, many august institutions. A lot of you are here today. So I think we can celebrate that personal relationship that we have now between the British and the Chinese. And you are all bridge builders in your different ways. And just look at the number of Chinese students who are here, 200,000, 300,000. These are all young people, gifted people, talented people, learning the language, learning the mores of the UK. That's going to be very, very good, I think, for both countries in the future as we build up this stock of human relationships. We are well suited, I think, the two countries to span the differences as there are between East and West to the mutual benefit of our economies and our countries. I definitely think that the two countries can play a big role in resilience, in reinforcing our own and the world's resistance to the swings and the perturbations that we will necessarily see. For example, I do believe that more Chinese banks, corporations and asset managers can play a role in turning the North Sea into a repository for green energy and particularly hydrogen production. And that would have to be an absolutely common venture between the UK, its European partners, some countries which are outside the European Union, such as Norway. I definitely think that working with China on areas like that could be a good area for a variable geometry, which is what Jacques Delors used to say. And I now see Meghnad Desai processing to the front of the room. Of course, Meghnad Desai is going to be on our first panel. He knows a lot about variable geometry, and he practices quite a bit of that itself. And I definitely think that expertise and capital from both sides can work together on building up these so-called real assets that the insurance companies, the pension funds, the sovereign funds of this world want in terms of the big investments needed in areas like the North Sea. Now, in resources like new technologies and new materials for decarbonisation, this is a well-travelled journey. Everybody knows that the China government, China authorities, Chinese corporations have got a big area of expertise in minerals, in rare earths resources in their own country, in Asia and in Africa. I do definitely think this is an area where Chinese and the UK can work together to overcome individual countries and regions' vulnerability to supply restraints. I think we need a satisfactory balance in raw materials, in competition and cooperation. So I'd like to put here as an idea, and it obviously needs a bit of fleshing out, and many of you in the audience might have an idea of what I'm getting at. What we need is a return to, in the 1950s, there was the Hallstein doctrine in NATO, coined by a West German political scientist and official Walter Hallstein. And this is what I would actually put into effect for commodities. It's a form of deterrence on the one hand and cooperation and dialogue on the other hand. And this was concerning the West's engagement in the 1950s with the Soviet Union. But it did actually end up with some détente. It ended up also 4 decades later with a thaw, the breakdown of the East-West divide, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the more or less bloodless overcoming of 4 or 5 decades of East-West confrontation. I definitely think there may be something in that in the field of commodities. But with dialogue and goodwill, I think there is a huge amount that China and Britain can do. We must concentrate on the road ahead. We must be mindful of the immense distance that we have already travelled, but we have to keep an eye out for what will be inevitably roadblocks and diversions along the journey ahead. We can all individually and also with our institutions help to make this experience more enriching and enlightening. And so in this constructive spirit, I'd like to declare this conference open. Second time we've done it. I hope we'll get better every year that we do it. I'm going to hand over now to the British Ambassador, Caroline Wilson, and she will be followed afterwards by Ambassador Zheng, who, as you know, is on his way here, and he knows my speech already, so what I've said will not be a surprise to him. So I'd like to welcome you all here. Do enjoy the dialogue. Let's have a proper cooperative dialogue with you in the audience as well, not just in the coffee breaks, but let's have lots of questions and answers, I hope, while we're actually engaging here. Thank you all very much for being here, and we look forward to a pleasant and successful conference. And I'm now going to hand over virtually to Caroline Wilson, who's the British Ambassador to China. Thank you very much.